Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast. Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 27. We're still waiting for copies of Alvin, the story of Ross Bagdasarian Sr., Liberty Records Format Films, and The Alvin Show. A reminder that I am scheduled to be on Stu's show live on April 22nd to discuss this book, and also I will be on Phil Hall's online movie show to discuss it as well. Our guest today has worked for many years for Marvel's Crazy magazine. Then he did Spies and Sabs for Cracked magazine for many, many more years, and then even more years drawing sports cartoons. Here he is, Michael Ricigliano. Okay, on the phone today I have Mike Ricigliano, also known as Ricig to fans of Cracked Magazine. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Fine.
Good.
So, we talked 8 years ago or more for my Cracked book. If you're cracked, you're happy. You gave me a lot of insight and everything.
Sure.
But, that was then, this is now, so let's start all over again.
I don't even remember that. I don't even remember many parts of that interview, Mark.
I don't either.
It'll be very fresh for me.
But it made it into the book, so if anybody wants to read what we talked about way back when. Anyway,
yes.
I guess, I usually talk about how people got their start, so tell us how you got your start in doing drawing and art.
Okay, well, I'm just like a lot of guys. Maybe I was a fan of Mad and also a fan of the sports cartoons in the Daily News, which Bill Gallo and Bruce Stark had growing up, and so part of my career has been as a sports cartoonist. Mm-hmm. The parts after Cracked have been as a sports cartoonist, and those two guys were the influence there. But the Cracked stuff is very much influenced by being a reader of Mad and Cracked as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I drew at home, and I drew when I got to college. I ended up starting to do some stuff for the newspaper, and I did a bunch of cartoons for my college newspaper, and they all had kind of a Mad magazine feel to them. So I did editorial cartoons and some sports cartoons, but they had more of a kind of like a zanier approach than a normal editorial cartoon would have. And I did some features there. I did one called The Beast that Ate Buffalo that was about a tuna casserole that attacked, faculty and administrators. That was kind of editorial in nature, and so it was kind of my goofy, maddish, crackish way of dealing with administration problems as a cartoonist.
Now, did you have any formal art training or any art classes growing up, or how did you get your start there?
When I went to my college, which was Buffalo State in Buffalo, New York, I went to be an art teacher, but I took a lot of I took some painting and drawing courses. It's not really an art school, it's more of a teacher's college, or was at the time, but I ended up taking some drawing and painting courses there, and then a number of design courses there too. So that that sort of contributed to being able to come up with a style, I guess. But no, not other than that, no real formal training.
Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, you got your professional start, as it were, at Marvel's Crazy magazine. Is that correct?
It is. My first published stuff was for Crazy, and Marv Wolfman, I think that was the editor then. And so my first cartoon was about wrestling, pro wrestling, and again I did the art and the lettering on that, not knowing much about typesetting and everything that was involved with it. So I handed them I think they ended up putting type over my lettering, if I recall. That's a long time ago, but it was I did a few articles for them, kind of writing to crack the magazine to see if I could. I had applied at Mad and was told by the person that interviewed me at Mad was Jerry DiFuccio, who was an associate editor then at the time, and he said to me, you should get into newspapers. There, you can draw daily there, and that will help you kind of develop your, polish your style some. And so, eventually I ended up doing that. But before that, I ended up, writing to Crack, and I ended up connecting with Robert Sproul's kids, to his son and daughter, who were running the magazine at the time, in essence, for him. He still ran it, but they kind of did the editing parts of that job, and they didn't like doing it. They didn't want to be stuck with doing that job. So after a while, they kind of sensed that I really wanted to learn the business and learn about it and had the enthusiasm for it. So, I'm guessing I told this story, but I'll tell it again.
Yeah.
I ended up, in order to get the job, I ended up mailing a different item of a possession of mine down to Florida, which is where they were based, every single day for a month.
That's right.
So I would send, different things, including laundry and whatever, down there. And then the last thing I sent was a paper mache mannequin of Sylvester that I had done. I've done these paper mache dummies over the years. I did one of Howard Cosell that's been on Monday Night Football. I've done one of Robert Irsay, the owner of the Colts, when they moved from town here in Baltimore. But at the time, I did one of Sylvester that was really a good likeness of him, and put it on a plane to Madeira Beach, Florida, and told them to get it at the airport. They did, and I was hired.
Wow.
The next day.
Wow.
So it was kind of a unique way to get hired, but it worked, and I was thrilled to be able to go down there and meet with everyone there. And it was kind of an odd. It was odd to be down there because where they were situated was far away and apart from the publishing world, which was mostly in New York at the time. So it was different, as I came to learn.
Now, saying all this, you've opened up a lot of questions for me. I want to go back to Crazy for a little brief bit.
Yes, sure.
Who did you talk to? Marv Wolfman? Was he the one who got you hired there?
Marv is the one that assigned me some. After I handed in the wrestling article, he then gave me a few other articles to do for them. I'm trying to remember.
Well, I remember the wrestling one because I remember this very obese wrestler.
Yeah,
and it really stuck in my mind. We're talking about, this is like 1976 is at the time frame, roughly?
Probably about 1976, that's right. I want to even say, I graduated in 74 from college, so it might have been 75.
Well, it could have been earlier, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying when it was in print. Right. I wouldn't have known when you turned it in.
Okay, gotcha. Right. Yeah, so I did. I remember doing one about street gangs too. That's another one I remember doing.
Yeah, that's right.
For Crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't remember that many others. So I mean, I did do others. I just don't remember the titles of some of those.
So the question now is, why didn't you stay? I mean, it was Marvel and everything like that, or did Crack just have a greater allure? What was your reason for changing?
I mean, I knew nothing about. I wanted to make a living doing this work, and I couldn't make a living doing a monthly drawing or a couple of pages for Crazy Magazine, especially at their rates. So
okay.
I was looking for a job that was in-house, that I could learn the business.
I see.
And learn about everything that was involved with putting together those kind of magazines.
Okay.
And so when I got to Cracked, this was a great education for me, because I think the first day I was there, I went in the back room and they had all the inventory on all the magazine pages that had been done by John Severin, and Jack Davis had done some stuff for Cracked, and a bunch of other cartoonists that I was familiar with, and to see them in person, you know, live in front of me, was the greatest education of how, you know, what magazine art looked like at the time, because I had a completely different idea of what, you know, about what I could and couldn't do for magazines. I had no idea how large you had to work, how it was formatted, all of that. So it was a great thing for me to kind of go down there and learn that way.
Right. And you started as an artist there, but you became assistant editor probably within a year. Was that your plan, or was that just happenstance?
No, it actually wasn't that way, Mark. I was hired as an in-office kind of person.
Okay.
I never started as an artist. I wasn't allowed to do art initially. Yep. And what happened was, I was doing the art, but part of my job as this person, which later became like an associate editor kind of job, was finding artists and finding writers, which at the time, Cracked was undermanned there. They just didn't have a lot of different artists that the publisher trusted. And so a lot of the art, I want to say 75% of the art in that magazine was John Severin.
Right.
And John Severin could do different styles, so he was a great art staff there. There were other artists, but the bulk of that work was John's. Yeah. And how I ended up doing art was Charlie Rodriguez, who used to do the shut-ups for Cracked, along with a couple of other pages. And I was always a fan of his style and stuff. And I remember when I first got down there and first talked to Charlie about his assignment or whatever I had to do, then he said, "You just got hired there." He goes, "You won't last for, you know, you'll be working at the local McDonald's in a month's time." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "No editors last there. Nobody lasts with the publisher. It's just a difficult place to be an editor or to do this kind of stuff."
Right.
And part of the reason for that was that it was there were no fax machines then. There was no email. There was no anything, and so all the art would have to come in from artists, and then it would be sent back to New York after we made changes or corrections, and they would have to reset type. Then it would come back here.
Wow.
And so traffic control was a really, really challenging thing. And what really made it challenging was the publisher, liked to talk to me about all his days in New York. So I would be brought in, and he would have these long discussions with me, and then a few days later, he'd say, "Where's all the work?" I'd say, I've been in the office talking to you all this.
Yeah.
So it was definitely challenging.
Okay.
But when Charlie Rodriguez quit, as I recall, I think he just decided he wasn't going to do it anymore for them.
Yeah.
Then he asked me to try a page of shut-ups, and in Charlie Rodriguez's style, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I was allowed to do that art for a number of months after that, and then they gave me a few other things to do art-wise and writing-wise, and I liked it. I liked that way more than I liked editing.
Yeah.
So at one point, he then said to me, "We need you to be editor. I can't let you do the artwork anymore because it's taking away from your job." And that's when I left. I just said, I really want to be a writer artist. I don't really want to be an editor, and so we had kind of a parting of ways for a little bit there.
Yeah. I think, when I interviewed you before, you had said that, and I just let it go. And then today I'm like looking through my notes, and what I realized is you got credited as an artist in Cracked earlier than as an editor. Like you were doing it, but you weren't credited in the magazine, so that's where that came from. So
that's interesting. Okay, so I really don't remember the sequence.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you what it says here. So your first artist listing is in issue 129, which was roughly 1975. And then the first assistant editor listing is 136, which is in 1976. So.
Okay, but I was doing the job of an assistant editor all those first few months that I was there before I was ever given a title. I was doing, in essence, the same thing.
Yeah.
All that time.
And I realized reading through Cracked, I mean, so many people got uncredited. I mean, writers especially. So
a lot of writers got uncredited, and again, John Severin would go in as different artists that he really wasn't. There was a lot of that going on. The letters page was kind of, I wrote the letters page, so it was just it was an interesting experience for sure.
Now, did you get any real letters back then? I mean, I think I asked you that before, but I think it wasn't until Mort Todd took over later that actual real letters started flowing in.
Yeah, when I was there, most of the letters were written in crayon. They were younger. The letters were from younger readers than they would have you want to believe, because they wanted the letters to be more sophisticated. So the letters page was. Sometimes we based the letters on some of the letters that were written, but most times we would write the letter and a response,
mm-hmm.
and it would be kind of a gag that we'd set up with the letter, and then the response. So there were some letters that were used, but there were also some that were setups that was part of my job as. Whatever I was then down there.
Well, it almost seems like what's the point? But I guess it looks good to have a letters page. So.
I think it looked good to have a letters page, and it was slicker. If you went through Mad's letters, I mean, maybe they did the same. I just think their audience might have been a little older maybe at the time, and so they could probably rely on some of their letters. Whereas this one, I don't know. It was problematical for the publisher to run these letters the way they were.
Right. Of course, you could have gone the route of National Lampoon and just totally faked them up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's right. I think this was more like a hidden ball trick. Like just try to get a fun, make the letters page a fun page to read, basically.
Right. Now, if you were down in Florida, where were you before? You were in New York, or where were you before?
Yes, I was in Buffalo at school. Then I went home, where my family lived on Long Island.
Okay. And
then from there, that's when I made the connection with the people at Cracked. And so it was a year later, I guess, that I was down in Florida.
Because I know, like. The address that was always listed in Cracked, at least in those days in the 70s, was just kind of like a mail drop, basically. It wasn't a real office or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. This was a Florida office that they had set up down there. That the publisher lived down there and loved living in Florida, and he was determined to make it work,
mm-hmm. despite
the inconvenience of this kind of mail traffic, issues that would always be part of the deadlines with that magazine.
It's kind of funny you had to ship it back and forth so many times.
It was insane. I honestly, you'd never even. It'd be easy to do that type of thing now.
Of course, yeah.
Back then, it was a nightmare because it had to cross. It probably went into a piece of art. One article probably went back to New York 3 or 4 different times mailing it before it actually ended up there and was published.
Wow.
From there, it was it was wild, man.
Do you know if anything ever got lost? Like, I remember once Sergio Aragonés said, I've been in every issue since, I don't know which one, 76 or something, years ago in 1962 or something. He says, I've been in every issue except one because he mailed his marginals in once and they got lost in the mail. And
right. I honestly, there had to be things that were lost. I'm probably just forgetting specific ones.
Okay.
There had to be things that were lost during that time. In fact, I do vaguely remember a John Severin cover getting lost and John having to do another cover.
Oh, wow.
I do remember that, but I don't remember the specific cover or the specific time frame on that.
Yeah.
But I think we dealt with that a few different times. They were good about it. They had a system sort of down, but it was challenging.
Yeah. Now, did your role change over time when you were the editor, as it were, or did you basically do kind of the same thing during the whole time you were doing it?
I other than doing the art as part of it and then having the art taken away from me, it was the same, which was, make sure that writers, particularly Joe Catalano, he was kind of the main writer then, and he probably wrote 75% of the magazine, or at least 50% of the magazine.
Yeah, for a time, yeah.
Yeah, for the time I was there, I think. And so I always talked to Joe, great guy. I had a lot of fun with him, and so I had a relationship with Joe, on the phone, and with John, and with a few of the other artists, and it was always kind of just staying on the line, making sure that they had, had their full allotment of work, and then, the rest of the time, coming up with concepts for articles and suggesting concepts to them, or going through over concepts with the publisher, and coming up. And part of that too was coming up with a lot of the kind of specials, because that was a job that editing job entailed, was kind of coming up with some games and things that we could put in to kind of spruce up the reprint issues.
Yeah.
And so I did do a lot of art for them over the years for those reprint issues, and even some art when I was doing the editing stuff down there too, and writing for some of the inserts.
Did you actually compile the material that was in a special, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from down in Florida,
Okay.
Like a lot of the concept work and some of the writing and art, like I said, because I did some of the writing and art for a number of those games and posters and things like that. Not all, but but a lot of the concepts, some of the concepts for those.
Now, did you actually design the game, or is it all the games kind of based on like Monopoly or something? I don't even remember. I played a couple of them, but
there were some more creative approaches than just Monopoly games. There certainly were some games that I remember that were Monopoly based, but there were other things in there that were. I know there was a dinosaur one that we did for a Monster one that I did the art and the writing for. That was kind of fun. I just don't remember all the specifics
right.
of it. It was all these different species of dinosaurs, things like that. And I'm honestly blanking on some of the games that were there, but it would be fun for me to kind of go through. It's funny, I had a bin of my artwork out. I haven't looked at it in so long, but there was someone that was interested in a piece of the art, so I kind of pulled it out, and I was looking for this one particular Spies Sab's centerfold.
Yeah.
And as I was going through them, then I kind of was remembering having done a number of these features over the years, including the Spy Stabs marginals, but also the centerfolds that I did for a number of years. And they had a thing called the Cracked Page, which was kind of like a top 10 list that I wrote and drew for a number of years too. So,
Mm-hmm.
after a while I was doing. They were giving me 4 or 5 pages an issue, which was a lot of fun for me to do.
Right. I remember you had like the center spread always.
Yes.
And occasionally you did covers, or at least pieces of the cover. Like, I think we talked about this last time. You had that one, I think it was a collector's edition, but it was like a Gulliver's Travels with Severin.
Yeah, I'm sure we talked about it, because that is my favorite thing I ever did at Crack. Only because I got my art and John, in there with John's art, who I loved so much and respected, and we worked on it together, by mail, but we worked on it together, and it just was just a fun piece when it came out. And I want to say that's the only cover art I ever was involved with, other than either concepting a cover or having a blurb or something on a cover, but I never did a cover painting for Crack besides that.
I think I remember you did, occasionally like a spy or Sab would be on the cover just in the corner, but you probably weren't even aware of it. The editor probably slapped it on there or something.
That could be. I mean, the thing about Spies and Sabs that was fun for me is I love Sergio Aragonés, so the stuff's obviously derivative of his, but I also, at the time, I had talked the publisher into letting me work, basically draw on the artwork or paste onto the artwork, so that rather than just be in the marginals, they would be interacting with the main art, with John Severin's art, say, where a guy would be putting devil horns behind a saboteur would be putting devil horns behind some character in a John Severin piece, and John was all right with it, and the publisher encouraged it too. So that was kind of fun to be able to do that type of stuff. Then.
Talk about the origin of it. Obviously, you said it's derivative of Sergio. It's also kind of derivative of Spy versus Spy by Antonio. But was that the intention, or was it just to get a marginal thing, or what was the intention behind it?
I don't actually remember. I'm sure it came from the publisher, like suggesting that we come up with something along those lines or whatever. And then I just, this is what I came up with, was these little kind of, you're right. It's very reminiscent of both, kind of combined both elements, and then, I still want to say the humor in it was my humor, it was very reflective of that kind of like practical joke type humor, which I kind of enjoyed. So I again was just looking at pages and pages of these things, and that's what I would do is I would come up with a full page of all these different marginals, and then we'd put them in there, or we'd have the people in New York put them on pages, and with some art direction from us down there. It was like I said, some stuff I actually just applied to the art myself when the art was there for me to do it with. When it was in transit and I couldn't, then I'd have to art direct it from down there.
Now, is it always your intention to continue? I mean, the feature lasted, I think, about 20 years.
Yes, I know.
But was it supposed to always be Spies and Sabs, or were you trying other concepts that failed, or anything else?
I think I just rolled with what they were wanting me to do, and and I wanted to work, and so I forgot who suggested that they'd be a centerfold, but it worked sort of as a centerfold for them, because those centerfolds, even in Mad and even in Cracked, were busy things, and I enjoyed doing kind of busy scenes, and so we did a lot of those Spies and Sabs at the Winter Olympics, or Spies and Sabs at the Star Wars bar, or Spies and Sabs at a football stadium, that type of thing, where we could kind of have a lot of activity going on both pages, and also work in the kind of interplay between the spies and the saboteurs, which they initially were called investigators. They were saboteurs and investigators, but I think that that also came from the publisher that they'd be called spies and saboteurs because it was closer to the Mad product, probably. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you started off just as an artist, or did you do writing from the beginning? Because again, going by credits, you didn't get a writer's credit for many years later.
Right.
So most of your stuff, did you write, or did you have other people writing your stuff as well, or what did you do?
I did all of that. I did a number of those things. I think I wrote the Shut Ups, which was my first. And I also wrote, we used to have the Great Moments feature on the back page, and I wrote and drew some of those, but I also wrote some for other artists to do, and then I wrote some that I eventually got to do on the back page there. So, yeah, I enjoyed the writing aspect of it as much as I enjoyed the artwork part of it too. And I can't draw like some of the artists that have drawn in Mad or Cracked, but because I could do both things, I think that's why I was able to kind of get the amount of pages I got in there. And like I said, towards the middle to the end of that run there, I was doing a good amount of pages in the magazine. And I think part of that was that it was easy for them to kind of, have me write and draw the pieces, and they trusted that, and so they could just go writing and art together, and then put it in the magazines.
Yeah. Did you write the great moments that Warren Sattler tended to draw, or no?
I am thinking that I wrote some.
Okay.
The publisher wrote some. I remember that.
Okay.
He would have a concept occasionally and would throw it out there. So I think Bob Sproul wrote a few of those.
Okay.
I'm sure Joe Catalano wrote some. I think it was more of, we would submit ideas and whichever idea worked best, that would go to the artist that it was assigned to, which Warren was assigned a lot of those when I was there, I think.
And it seems like, they assigned ones where, not to belittle your art, but if there was a caricature involved, it seemed like Sattler got it more than you. It's like...
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, I can do caricatures just fine right now, and part of that is from doing sports cartooning and whatever, where I'd have to do it. But at the time, I was kind of... Are you still there?
Yes.
I think my phone is starting... I'm going to do something here. I'm going to connect it to a wire down here just in case I'm hearing a beep, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Hang on a second. If I lose you, I'll call you back.
Okay.
But,
let's see where... Okay.
Yeah.
Make a note of this so I can edit it a little bit.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Usually I leave it uncut, but if, we talk about, like, oh, my phone, anyway.
Right, exactly.
So, Warren Sattler, that one I remember is, like, it was like a prehistoric version of the Beatles or something, and then there was a caricature of George Harrison.
I do remember that one.
Yeah, I don't know if you wrote that one, but I remember they got Sattler, and I said, yeah, they probably got him because he knows how to draw the Beatles or something, yeah.
Right, probably right. I'm sure that was the case, and I'm sure they would also happily use John Severin if he could have, but he was probably too busy doing 25 other pages in that.
And then the ones I remember you did were more of the grotesques. Like, I remember this one with, like, a caveman giving nose jobs and smacking him in the head with a flat nose.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Hang on one second.
Sure.
Okay, now I got a wire in there, so I'm hoping that'll...
Okay.
If that's the thing. So, yeah, no, that is all true, and that was kind of fun to do those, do the color work on those, because that was my first chance to do color. Whenever I would get one of those assignments, it would be fun to do color on the back cover.
And how did you do that back then? I mean, you colored it, the typical layers of plastic, the way they used to do layouts that way, and that?
Correct.
Okay.
It was all amberlith overlays.
Yeah.
So it was, a number of those, if you look back on them and they'd be like full color, it would be like, 7 amberlith, cut color things, on top of one another. It was a much longer process than now.
And you did it all yourself, or?
Yes.
Oh wow.
I did. I cut my color, and I did my drawings, and then cut color on top of that for those particular pieces of art. For other things, I think other things I cut my own amberlith on and any kind of gray tones too. So.
Yeah. So did you put zip screen? I don't remember.
I did do some Zipatone screen back then too on some of the art. I also did that, but I also, after a while, I just did these amberlith overlays. It ended up being cleaner for me to do it that way.
Yeah, it's just funny nowadays. It's all on computer. And I have to think back. Oh yeah, they used to do it that way. It's like
exactly. Exactly. It's a much easier, cleaner kind of process right now.
Now, you mentioned Charles Rodriguez. Was he down in Florida, or you were just speaking with him over the phone as well?
He was over the phone.
Okay.
Didn't he live in Massachusetts? I don't know.
I don't know, really.
That's kind of my recollection, but I don't really remember that. But he was brilliant. I loved his stuff. I loved the Aesop's Brothers and in Lampoon, and I loved the other stuff that he used to do at the time, and I loved what he did for Cracked. He always thought of it as kind of like like a secondary type of job for him. He preferred some of the other things, this Playboy work and his other stuff.
Right.
But for me, those were among my favorite pages in Cracked, just because his drawing style was so funny.
Well, Mort Todd always says he used to pore over, Rodriguez's work. He used to pore over it because there'd be basically piles of whiteout. It was just kind of the way he drew.
Yes, right. Yeah, my work is also very messy too.
Oh, okay. I mean, I have seen some of your originals, but it's like the original I have of yours didn't seem that messy. But it was a Spies and Sab centerfold, and it seemed pretty straightforward. So I don't know.
Yeah. Back in the day, especially when I was using the Zipatone, there'd be pieces of food caught under Zipatone and whatnot, So it was a better process to go the other way for me. I'm not a very neat artist.
Oh. But my question about asking about Rodriguez mainly is, apart from the Sproul's, did any artists ever come down there, or is it all done in the mails back then?
No artists when I was there, I was only there for a year.
Okay.
So no artists
or writers
were actually there, or came there. I want to say maybe Joe came there one time, but I got to meet some of the artists when they had the Cracked reunion, big Cracked reunion they had at one time, and including Don Martin, who was working for Cracked at the time. He was part of that reunion too, and of course that's the first time I'd ever gotten to meet John. So I was very, very excited to meet John at that reunion. And John had drawn me a number of times into some of his artwork. He would throw me in there occasionally. He had photos of me, and so we knew what I looked like. And I have some pieces of art of his that were drawings of me. It was really kind of really cool to get those in there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned kind of vaguely earlier, but you didn't work at Cracked straight through, right? You quit for a bit, or how did that work?
Well, it was kind of a falling out, really, at the time with the publisher. I just did not want to only edit there, and that's kind of what he was restricting me to. And so I felt almost, it was stupid in a way. I felt like the only way I'm really going to do art is to leave as an editor and submit as an artist. But he was so angry with me for leaving as an editor that I wasn't allowed to do art for, a year or so at least, and then eventually they kind of let me back into it as an artist.
That was with Sproul. That was with Sproul, so he did let you back?
Yes. Okay. Again, I'm vague on remembering the timeline on all of that, but I think eventually they let me back into the mix. It might not have been under him, though. It might have been when they had a different
Well, let's see.
different set of editors
Well,
there.
Sproul was there till 85, 84.
Okay, so no, I definitely did artwork for them, you know, before that. I'm sure that, although you probably have the records of it, Mark, I don't.
Well, I indexed everything, but yeah. And then I think, everybody left briefly, when Paul Lakin took over and the whole thing, when Sproul got out of it. And but then slowly everybody started coming back. Now, were you approached by Mort Todd, a.k.a. Michael Delphine, or did you pursue Cracked again, or how did that work? How did you get back in the later 80s?
I honestly don't remember. I know Michael. I did do a lot of work for Mike when he was over Mort. So it might have been him that reapproached me. I'm not sure. I don't remember if I did work for Paul. I did do work for Paul, so it might have been Paul.
Okay.
But I don't honestly. I wish I did recall it better. I just don't.
Yeah. But you mentioned that 30th anniversary party. That was when Mort was at the helm.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And at the time, was Jerry DeFuccio there then too? So there was.
It was a little bit of an overlap. So yes, I don't know if he came in exactly at that point. See, so around the 30th anniversary or a little after, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So it was, I loved working with Jerry, and I would, go in to the offices and meet with those guys. So Jerry and Lou Silverstone was, the editor there for a while, and I loved working with Lou too. And those are two Mad Magazine guys that I really got a kick out of, hearing stories from those guys about all of that. And another editor, I'm blanking on his name, that worked with Lou, like a co-editor.
It was probably well after Jerry left, I got Andy Simmons. So.
Yeah, Andy, right? I'm sorry, I just forgot Andy's name.
I'll help you.
Also a great guy.
But that's through the 90s. After Mort left, in 1990, then the 90s were pretty much Jerry, Lou, and then Andy later, and that was the 90s. So.
And that's probably when I did the bulk of my artwork for Cracked under those guys, because they just kind of were content to just kind of let me do my thing, basically, during those years. So.
Did they give you much direction, or they just trusted much what you did?
I think they were depending on me for a few pages per issue, plus the Cracked page, plus the marginals and all that. So they and then maybe another article or one. I did a few. I did a number of like one-pagers, kind of like Don Martin type one-pagers for a while there, especially when Jerry was there, because he loved Don Martin, as did I, and so he liked the whole concept of one-pagers, which a number of different artists have done those over the years at Cracked, but I also could do those and I could write those. So I did some one-pagers under Jerry and continued to do some under Andy, with Andy and Lou there.
Yeah. And during those later years, the whole operation came back to New York. Did you work in the office there, or were you out of your house at that point?
I mean, I did stuff out of my house, but I would go in. It was about a 2-hour train ride from where I lived out on Long Island into the city, and so I often would go in. Sometimes I would work there, but most times I'd work on the things at home. But a lot of times I would go in just to kind of meet with them and hang with them a bit and get some feedback on stuff. So I definitely got to. I definitely was in the office a decent amount of time when Andy and Lou were there, and Jerry.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever once go back to doing like your assistant editing type job, or was that just a one-time only thing?
That was a one-time only thing.
Okay.
I think I could have done it just fine, and I think I would have been happy doing both jobs. I don't think I would have left if I was allowed to do art and write and edit under Bob, but the edict was not to do that, and maybe I even misunderstood what he wanted to do there. I don't know. It just seemed like the thing that I wanted to do most, he was not allowing me to do, and so I felt like I had to, start in another direction again. I ended up working for a greeting card company after that. I worked for American Greetings for a while and learned some stuff there, and so, but after leaving American Greetings and working for the newspapers, that's when I picked up doing crack again and had that nice long run with them.
You mentioned the newspapers there. I'll just mention. Were you doing just sports cartoons then, or was it just any variety of type of spot illustration, or what type of stuff?
Well, I was hired in 1978, I guess it was, at the Buffalo Courier Express to be just a staff artist. But Buffalo's a good sports town, and so I just kind of ended up starting to do these weekly sports cartoons there, and then I kind of made a name for myself in Buffalo as a sports cartoonist there. We had a great editorial cartoonist in Tom Tolles, who is the editorial cartoonist now for the Washington Post. So I did the stuff in Buffalo. Then that paper folded. I ended up in Baltimore at a newspaper. That paper folded, and I ended up at a different newspaper in Baltimore, at the Baltimore Sun, Evening Sun. That paper folded. And then ended up at the Morning Sun, and that's when I was doing work for USA Today and the Baltimore Sun and the LA Times, and these were all sports cartoons, though, and then those things faded away when newspapers started shrinking. About 6 years ago, when newspapers were really shrinking and their budgets were shrinking, and sports cartooning became kind of where it used to be a big thing.
Yeah.
For me growing up, it just became a luxury for a lot of newspapers, and they did a big article on it in the New York Times in which they used my art and featured me. There was only 3 sports cartoonists at the time in the country that they could find featured in the article.
Wow.
So it was a great article.
Yeah.
Look it up sometime. It's really a good article about the dying art of sports cartooning.
Right. The only thing I could think of off the top of my head, other than the ones you mentioned at the beginning, like Bruce Stark or something like that, is, they occasionally put that comic strip Tank McNamara in the sports section, things
sure,
like that.
And that's and we actually, there was a guy in Buffalo that took a class of mine up there, and we started a comic strip called Sneaker, which was kind of an alternative to Tank McNamara for 2 newspaper towns. So, in other words, if a newspaper had Tank McNamara in it and the other competing newspaper wanted a sports-type comic strip, Sneaker was that. But the problem was 2 newspaper towns were already shrinking rapidly at that time. So we weren't able to sell it to enough newspapers to make it worth our while, and that comic strip never got off the ground. But yeah, my sports cartoons over the years are more like a Bill Gallo one, but more Mad Magazine, more panel-y,
right?
More multi-panel type cartoons with kind of a zany, twist to it. And yeah, I've made a living basically doing sports cartoons until the last few years or so.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you still do them now? Or I think when we talked last, you were still doing them pretty regularly, but that was a while back.
No, I mean, I do one a month for a publication here called Press Box, and I do just an occasional one for the Baltimore Sun, but there's just not a crying need for sports cartoons anywhere right now, or at least the budgets or the pages in newspapers to have those. So I don't really have any, other than the monthly Press Box gig, I don't really have a venue for the sports cartoons anymore, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you ever approach the Biggie Mad nowadays, now that they've changed editors and everything?
No, I haven't. I don't. I haven't done that. I probably should give it a shot. It would be a dream come true if I did. But
I know a couple people. Bob Fingerman went over there. And, he'd never been in Mad before, and now with Bill Morrison in charge, there he is. And I go, Okay.
Well, that's awesome for him. That's great. I don't know that I'm ambitious enough to do that at this point, but I might try.
No big deal. I always ask people. It's like, some people. Oh.
I did start doing that trivia thing that I do on Facebook now that you've seen, and I did sell it to Go Comics for a 3-year period, and I was hardly making any money on it at all, and I couldn't really do it the way I wanted to do it, which is kind of the way I do it on Facebook now, where people can post photos and videos and whatever. It's just much more of a fun, interactive thing on Facebook. I don't get paid for it on Facebook, but I enjoy. But the little I got paid at Go Comics, it didn't really matter anyway. So
right.
I prefer having it where it is, and I guess I'm still hopeful that at some point I could find someone that would be interested in it, or pay better than Go Comics did for something like that, because it is fun. People do it all the time. It's very, very active game almost every day that it's on there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I in a previous podcast I talked to Joe Waz, who he does maze tunes, and actually he does pretty well with that, and he just draws mazes. It's kind of a bizarre little thing that he does that took off somehow.
Does he do them on Facebook, or he does them through Go Comics?
Well, it's through Go Comics, but he also gets in the newspapers too with it, and it's kind of a weird kind of latter day, considering today's newspaper success. I mean, he's not in 3,000 papers like a Peanuts or something like that.
Right.
But I mean,
sure.
It was kind of like it was kind of a bizarre success, that just happened to him. And
I'll have to look that up. That's really fun. It's great. It's great for him.
Yeah.
And I left on good terms with Go Comics, and it was with the idea that I would maybe try something different for them, but I just haven't done it. If I were to do it with them again, it wouldn't be this type of feature, because this type of feature, even though I had a nice following there, it's just the way that they pay there for posting and reposting for people's posts. It just didn't add up for the amount of work I put in on that every day.
Mm-hmm. Going back to Cracked a little bit, and then we'll talk about some other things you've done.
Sure.
So you were at Cracked pretty much almost to the very end. I mean, is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Dick Culpa took over and everything?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
I think I did much less work when Dick Culpa took over, though. I think they were going in a little bit different direction than I wanted to go in. Like it's a little more adult.
Yeah.
And I wasn't on board with that. It's not like I don't do adult type things. I just thought, I've always thought of Cracked as not an adult thing. So I kind of backed off. I kind of backed off of it at that point.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. Yeah, it seemed like near the end you appeared, but so did others that appear less frequently. And then there's other artists that appeared more frequently. So it's just kind of a transition at that point.
Yeah, there was a transition then, and I was very busy then with sports cartooning stuff. So I didn't really have a ton of time to devote for it anywhere, nor I had really steady income flows at the time from the newspaper stuff too. So I didn't really need to be doing the Crack stuff at that point, I don't think.
Yeah, you sound like Walter Brogan. I interviewed him again. It's like he didn't need to do Crack, but he liked doing Crack at the time. And then
yes, always I liked doing it, because it's the closest thing I've had to my sense of humor, basically, which is even with newspapers, I have to kind of bend the way I write a little bit more, whereas with Cracked, my natural kind of writing style, my natural kind of drawing style is that kind of satire magazine kind of style, a la Mad.
Yeah. Now, if something like Cracked or anything came back, or any humor magazine, is that where your interest would lie nowadays, or are you just kind of done with that and more interested in other cartooning opportunities?
Well, I'm looking for any cartooning opportunities right now. I just don't have a ton of them, but that would be totally in my wheelhouse, and I would love to resurface that way. I just don't know where those are right now, Mark. I just don't. I just think it's hard to find them, and I'm also lazy. So. No,
well, you've only been drawing for 40 years. I don't know how lazy you are, but okay.
Right. But I haven't been as ambitious as I should be on some of these fronts, and I should do more things. Like I'd like to try. I don't think I'll sell any, but I'd like to try to submit some New Yorker type cartoons. Just different types of things to kind of to do that would be funny and use funny illustrations. That's I'm happy to do that type of work if that work comes my way. I've never been great at looking for that kind of work, which is part of what a freelancer needs to be. Yeah.
And I always like your work, so that's why I'm like, can you be in here? Can you be in here so I can see your work? That's what I want to see.
I do more I do a lot of custom stuff now for pay, and I don't love doing that. I'd much rather be published, but I can do it well, and and I'm happy to do that to keep some income coming in.
Well, define custom stuff? What does that mean? I'm sorry.
Caricature work. I said, I do caricatures, posters, special occasion posters, T-shirt designs, caricatures, hats, that type of thing.
I see. Okay. And I assume if somebody wanted to, you do a commission or something like that. It's like somebody wanted to Spy versus Sab poster and say do a commission, you do something like that.
It's so funny you said that, because I do have, and I want to say, Chet put me on to this one guy that you may even know him, and he specifically wanted a shut-ups page drawn that he wrote. It's not going to publication anywhere. He just wanted to have a shut-ups page drawn in the style that it used to be drawn in at Crack with his panels and writing on it. So I drew it up for him, and I just sent it off to him. He really liked it. So, and I charged him a commission for doing that. So I'm happy to do that type of thing too.
All right.
Again, I'd rather have stuff published, but if there's opportunities for that, I'll jump on them. But without those, with less of those for me anyway, I'm happy to do this other stuff too.
Yeah, I know some. I have friends, and we may even be talking about the same people without saying names. It's like I have some friends that will get certain artists to do cover recreations, Marvel Comics covers and things like that. And especially if the original artist is no longer with us, if the other person can draw kind of in a similar style, they do that.
I would like to at some point, I'm not sure any of this artwork would have value for anybody, but I have a lot of artwork from those years, and I just was going through it. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this stuff? So if you ever hear of anyone that's interested in cracked art, original art, I've got a lot of it, and I'd love to move it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the perfect place to plug it. So it's like, because I'm going to post it on the website on the crack page and things like that. So you can certainly.
Sure.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the end. We'll get all the plugs in and all that stuff.
Okay, great.
What was I going to ask you? Is there ever a chance? You say you have all this artwork to either self-publish or publish through another vendor, just kind of a best of, the best of all your material, or is there copyrights or anything prohibiting maybe you doing that, because it doesn't really say cracked on it, it's just work you did.
Well, some of the stuff does say, the cracked page says cracked on it, and a few other things too, but most of it does not. I have never really thought about doing that. I'm not sure what kind of an audience there is for that. Some of this stuff is not as timely now as it was back then, so I'm not sure. I just don't know how something like that would go. I've never really explored it either. I've explored it more on the sports cartoon front because some of that stuff is pertinent to local places that I've worked.
Yeah. And actually, that was a question I was thinking earlier, is like, have you ever compiled any of your sports cartoons into any sort of book collection or anything like that? I'd be interested in something like that, but...
Yeah, the Sun wanted to do one years ago, and I, again, was not ambitious enough to kind of follow up on it, so I didn't really do that. And, again, I think some of that stuff is, some stuff would work there, and some stuff would be just, that's also very dated, and that's fleeting dated stuff. Even some of the crack stuff, because it's movies that we run all the time, but sports events, because they are, they happen and then they're gone, and the next sporting event happens. Some of that stuff doesn't carry like, say, a good editorial cartoon would, where you've now some of it does. Some of it's issue oriented, and those type of cartoons I think have a lot more staying power.
So not much demand for Super Bowl 22, huh?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know.
Since we're at 53 now, yeah.
I'm not sure. If someone came along to me and asked me about that, I'd be all in on it. I would just round up this stuff. But I think, you sound way more organized than me, Mark, as a person that, has all your stuff filed. I have just all my stuff in big print.
Or I'm just more enthusiastic about your artwork. It's like, I want a Ricig book, please. No, it's like, well, it actually kind of bugged me, to tell you the truth, that Mad used to publish, and they don't even do this now, but, like a Don Martin paperback or a Sergio paperback. And so there was all these paperbacks featuring their star artists. But Crack never did that. They did a few just standard paperbacks with just random stuff, and it was before you were even there, and that was kind of the end of it. And it's like, I know Mort Todd kind of tried to do that, but he still kind of focused more on like Severin and Davis and a few others,
Yeah, I think, and he probably did it the best way that you could do that, which was that, Mad had such unique artists that had such unique, and such unique features. Crack didn't have as many of those to my thinking. Was, Mad had, Paul Coker and all those kind of horrible cliches, and you could put all those in a book, and that's a great book, Same with,
which they have.
I love those. That's another one of my favorite artists.
Yeah. I don't know. I just am like thinking, you should do, like if you worked at Mad, you would have had one. You would have had the Best of Spies versus Stabs book. It's like,
yeah, maybe, but I mean, that's. I don't have any regrets because of that. Like I like being a team guy on Crack with all the different artists that were there, and and part of just the pages that kind of made that up. To me, just kind of working with someone as super talented as John Severin on the same staff as me was really very, very exciting for me as a humor illustrator.
Yeah. Did you do any other mashups like that? Like, we were talking about that Gulliver cover. And also I wanted to ask you about that. How did that work? Did he paint Sylvester first and then you drew directly on top of it, or was it overlay, or how did it work?
Yeah, it was an overlay that I ended up painting. As I recall, I think I painted, I did an overlay. We shot it on film, so it was black and white line work on film, and then I painted behind the spy set, so they were black and white, even though John's artwork was color.
Right.
And then, but I think as I recall, I think the skin tones I painted in there too, and that was laid over the cover, and it worked really well. I mean, I think we concepted some just had some gags that we mutually worked on together over the phone with it. But it was basically, kind of a rough layout of what we thought would work good, and then the concept of just interplaying all this other stuff in it, and then, getting the actual painting from John and working on that that way with the overlay. It was fun. Yeah, I wish I would have gotten to do more things like that, but I don't recall many other projects like that.
Other than what you're saying, drawing directly on other people's art, right?
Well, that wasn't really. I don't even know if some of John didn't care at all.
Yeah.
John was fine with it, but there might have been other artists that maybe didn't like that. I don't know.
Well, I remember
him basically had the publisher's blessing, so I did it.
I think I don't know if the artists were consulted. I think they just stuck it in there, saying, "Hey, this looks funny."
I think you're right.
Because
it was interesting. The whole thing with reprint books and stuff is just. I've always found it kind of an interesting topic, just because that's one of the reasons Don Martin was there, was that he, they waived the reprint thing for him, and he always had that issue with Mad. So for a couple of years anyway, we got, cartoon illustration royalty on that magazine, which was just awesome for me to be able to. And it's interesting with him in that, I worked for American Greetings for a while, for about a year, and before getting into newspapers, and they had a concept room in there where you would start as an artist writer for American Greetings, for Highbrow, for the funny line. You would start in a concept room, and there were Don Martin worked there for a very short time as a greeting card artist, and did some concept things. A couple of his concept drawings were there. So were Robert Crumb's. A lot of pretty good artists that actually worked there a brief time and got out of Dodge very quickly. Right. I stayed there for a year though, and enjoyed it very much. Actually.
Well, I think I knew already you were a big Don Martin fan, as am I, because you did a tribute cartoon to him in one of the latter issues of Cracked. Yeah, it was like
right. Okay, I do remember that, and I actually stayed in touch with his wife. I've just lost touch with her the last few years, but I used to always send her a Christmas card, and she would send me a bunch of stuff too. So she's great. Also, but when I teach my kids, I teach a cartooning class now just once a week, and I try to do some things that. Because these are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, so they're not all talented cartoonists. They just have to take the course no matter what. And so one of the things I do is like a sound effects exercise where we have a bunch of drawings and you have to come up with Don Martin-like sound effects. The kids love that because even if you can't draw, you can make up funny sounds. And, of course, no one did them better than him.
Right. And of course, nowadays, today's kids wouldn't even know Don Martin did those things, so you could be all...
No, I know. So in a way, it does kind of, alert them to that type of thing. But they're not... I don't use Don Martin drawings there. I just use just cartoons that say I drew up. But I show them some Don Martin cartoons. Say, look, cool. This is how this guy approached it. It was very funny manner, and they get a kick out of that. And, and then they go themselves. They try to mimic them. Great stuff. That guy was amazing.
Just before we close, I was just curious, so what other artists you admired over the years?
I love Gary Larson's stuff, of course. I think he's always was brilliant, as a writer and an artist, just funny. He just drew funny, Let's see. On the spot here. Some of the New Yorker guys like George Booth and Charles Adams and some of those guys I think are fantastic. I love Ronald Searle's work, which is really zany. Also, I'm a big fan of Tom Tolles' editorial cartoons in the Post, just partially because I work with him, but partially because he has a very liberal view on things, as do I. So I just love that he has kind of a very unique style. As a editorial cartoonist, that his style, he developed a very unique style, not like a McNally style, which was popular at the time. He developed his own style. So McNally's a great cartoonist too. I loved his stuff also. So I'm a fan of a lot of different cartoons. Mort Drucker, of course, any and almost all of the Mad guys, but Mort Drucker, right. Paul Coker, and Don Martin, and Sergio in particular.
Yeah. Did you try to pattern yourself after anybody in particular, or just you kind of create your own style?
I mean, when I was at American Greetings, I tried to do a little bit of a Coker kind of style, because he was a Hallmark artist, right, for a number of years, and so I was a little bit derivative of his stuff. But I think my styles, I think I developed my style at least over the to more of my own style over the last few years. But I think initially, like we said, Sergio for sure, and then little Don Martin, a little here and there, little parts from everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, now it's that proverbial end of the show plug time. So, do you have any websites or anything to plug? Anything you want to sell?
I wish I did. I don't really have that. If anybody likes playing trivia, we have a lot of fun on it on Facebook. Just Facebook friend me on Facebook, Michael Ricigliano, and you can get on there and play along. I would love to be doing a little more drawing. If anybody out there is interested in this style and this type of writing, I'm available for doing certain projects.
No problem.
I'm older now, so I keep selective about my projects. But I still love drawing, and I still love writing, and I would relish the chance to get some stuff published out there that would be funny.
Okay, so the Facebook page is probably the best place to contact you then?
That's the best place to contact me, and connect with me.
Okay.
Is via Facebook, yes.
All right. Well, very good. And let's see. I thank you very much for being my podcast guest. Any final words of wisdom or anything for any aspiring artists, or anything to say profoundly about your career?
No, I've loved being a cartoonist my whole career. There's people I'm huge fans of, that just to be kind of doing the same type of stuff that they do over the years, and to be published for all those years in a few different types of publications, varieties of publications, has been something I'm very proud of as an artist. I'm happy to tell people that I've been a cracked magazine cartoonist, a sports cartoonist in a number of newspapers, a greeting card artist, all of those things. Those are great, fun careers, and I still enjoy having a lot of fun. So I picked the right career, I think.
Hey, okay. Well, I want to thank you for being my podcast guest today. I always enjoy talking with you, and I want to thank you again.
Thanks, Mark. It's fun being on with you, and I appreciate the fact that you're such a big cartoon fan too. So it's easy to talk to you that way.
All right, sounds good. And we'll be posting this in a few weeks, and hopefully we'll get more responses from other crack fans and just fans of your art in general.
Great. Thanks again. I'll see you back on Facebook.
Okay. I'll see you on Facebook too. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Take care.
All right. Bye. Thank you for listening. Thank you again for being my special guest, Michael Ricigliano. Episode number 28 will be coming soon. If you'd like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. You can also become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions. And if everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019, Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much and have a good night.